Now, when we talk about division, we're looking at how division and multiplication are related.
The standard that we were focusing on today was looking at how we can use properties to solve multiplication problems and division problems, and specifically looking at the associative property, the commutative property, and the distributive property, and how we can apply those to solve multiplication and division problems. There were really 4 different groups, and all 4 of those groups were working on separate tasks in a sense, just so that we could see really all 4 of those big things, big topics that were part of it. One of the groups you saw was working on the smart board. They were working with the commutative property and looking at how they could make arrays and how those arrays would be able to use, like a 2x9 array would look like a 9x2 array just by turning it or rotating it or doing it a different way.
Do a number like 9 times 2, then turn it around to 2 times 9, but it's still the same thing, but it's switched around. 5 times 4 equals 20. Now it's 4 times 5, and it still equals 20. So it's just switched around. When it gets wrong, it shows what it's just the same thing, but in different ways.
It still gave them the same product. It still gave them 9 times 2 of 18, but they made that connection that the commutative property is just, taking those 2 numbers, and whether they did 9 times 2 or 2 times 9, they recognize that it really doesn't matter when they're multiplying, that you still get the same product of 18. Another group was working with particularly the associative property and how, in some real-world problems, how they could apply those things, and whether or not they took and multiplied the 3 factors that they had. The order of those factors didn't really matter, but how they multiplied them, or how they chose to order them, is how they were able to get to their answer. One of the things that all 3 of the groups that were using were beans they had access to, that they could use as manipulatives to kind of move them around and put different beans in different places to create arrays or to create different groups to model their mathematics. By making that connection to the concrete objects of the beans, then they can move to that abstract understanding of just recognizing that 2 times 9 and 9 times 2 are the same. Another group was working with the distributive property and how they could essentially break apart a more difficult number, a number that's not one of the facts that they learn, that they don't really know their 18s, they don't know their 30s facts, they don't know some of those things, but how they could take a multiplication problem like that, break it apart, and really understand, well, I'm doing the same thing, I'm just making it so that mentally I can understand it a little bit easier.
We're doing 9 times 3. We will grab 9 groups of 3, and then we would add them all up.
So how did you started with this idea of multiplying, right? And you had 3 factors that you were multiplying?
Yeah.
But then you transitioned into using the distributive property as well when you were multiplying, because you didn't know your 30s facts, did you?
No.
Awesome. Will you guys share that in the closing?
Okay, sure.
Awesome. Go ahead and start working on the second.
The most important thing that I was looking for was, specifically when I was going around to their groups, was that their language, the language that they were using, was good math vocabulary, and that they were using some of those terms that they know to use for multiplication and division. I think that's one of the things that you really look for, and you saw that when they were presenting.
9, and I broke it up into tens, and then I did 10 times 9 times, and then I added 90 plus 90 plus 90. So then I went over here, I did 90 plus 90 equals 180 plus 90 equals 270. So I went back and I counted how many 90s I have, and I went 1, 2, 3. So then I knew that my correct answer would be 270.
So one of the things that I like to do with my students is have them make that connection that, yes, there's a property like, A times B equals B times A, but what we're really looking at are numbers and how we can, organize those numbers mentally and organize those numbers to be able to better understand it, because that's ultimately what's important. It's great that they know what those properties are, that they can say, oh, that's the commutative property, or that's the associative property, or that's the distributive property. But ultimately what's really important is that they don't just know what that particular property is, but how to apply it.
Well, Kayla, I was thinking maybe you can multiply like 10 times 3 first, and then you can do 3 times 9, because it's always good to start with the first problem. Yeah, I know.
So if you're a mom and you ask me, and you're, well, what's the most important part or the most important thing that you can get out of this particular standard or this particular lesson, and it would be for students to really just make sense of their mathematics, to understand why it is that they're doing what they're doing. Not necessarily that they can put a name to a property, that's great, and they have that understanding, but so that they can make sense of their mathematics and use that as understanding so that they can build on to when they're when they are working in Algebra 2 and they are working in the higher level mathematics courses where they have all those different proofs and things like that, and they're having to use some of those properties.
So then we divided it into 3 equal groups right here, and then we counted and put 1 in each one until we got to 18, and we did that in each group, and then we figured out that the answer to our division problem was 6 because there was 6 in each group.